Have you ever come across a Bible verse that made you stop and think, wait, what does that really mean? Well, today we're diving into one of those verses that has puzzled believers for centuries. In Genesis 6:3, God says something intriguing. "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. Now, if you're like most people, you might be wondering, what exactly does that mean? Did God really set a cap on our lifespans at 120 years? And if so, how do we explain people living beyond that age or the centuries-long lifespans mentioned earlier in the Bible? We're about to embark on a fascinating journey through this verse, exploring various interpretations, including what some ancient texts like the Book of Enoch and the Apocrypha have to say. We'll also take a look at the life of Jeanne Calment, the longest living person ever verified, a woman who lived to be over 120 years old. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll have a fresh perspective on this verse and its implications for us today. So let's dive in. Genesis 6:3 is one of those verses that can be a bit puzzling at first glance. It reads, "Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. Now, some people take this verse at face value, believing it's God setting a lifespan limit of 120 years for humanity. But when you look around, you'll notice that most people don't live nearly that long. So what's going on here? One interpretation is that this statement is less about individual lifespans and more about a countdown to the flood. God is essentially giving humanity 120 years to repent before he sends the floodwaters to cleanse the earth. This interpretation makes sense when you consider the context of the surrounding verses, which describe a world that had become thoroughly corrupt and filled with violence. But that's not the only way to understand this verse. Some scholars believe that God was indeed limiting the human lifespan, but that it was a gradual process. Before the flood, people lived for hundreds of years. Just think about Methuselah, who lived to be 969 years old. After the flood, however, lifespans began to decrease, with 120 years being more of an upper limit. And even today, while it's rare, some people do live close to or past 120 years. Speaking of living a long life, let's talk about Jeanne Calment, a remarkable woman who holds the record for the longest verified human lifespan. Jeanne was a French woman who lived to be 122 years and 164 days old. That's right. She actually surpassed the 120-year mark, which adds another layer of intrigue to our discussion. Jeanne lived through an incredible span of history, from the late 19th century into the 21st century. Her life is a testament to the extraordinary possibilities of human endurance, even if cases like hers are incredibly rare. Now, what about those ancient texts I mentioned earlier? What do they have to say about this verse? Let's start with the Book of Enoch. This text isn't part of the Bible, but it was highly regarded by many early Jews and Christians. The Book of Enoch gives us a glimpse into a world filled with supernatural beings and explains that the Nephilim, those mysterious giants mentioned in Genesis, played a role in the corruption of the earth. According to Enoch, God's decree of 120 years could be seen as a response to the extreme wickedness that had spread throughout humanity, partly due to the influence of these fallen angels. In the Apocrypha, particularly the Book of Enoch, also known as Ecclesiasticus, we see a reflection on human mortality and the brevity of life. While it doesn't specifically address the 120 years mentioned in Genesis, it emphasizes the importance of living righteously within the limited time we have. This idea resonates with the notion that our days are numbered, and we should use them wisely. Christian mystics, too, have weighed in on the meaning of human mortality. Many of them interpreted the 120 years as symbolic of the limited time humans have to align themselves with God's will. They often viewed life as a spiritual journey, with each day bringing us closer to our ultimate reunion with God. This perspective encourages us to focus not just on the length of our lives, but on the quality of our spiritual walk during that time. So what does all of this mean for us today? Whether we see the 120 years as a literal cap on human lifespan, a countdown to the flood, or a symbolic reminder of our mortality, the message is clear. Our time on earth is limited. Jeanne Calment's incredible life of 122 years is a rare exception, but even she had a finite amount of time. It may also interest you to know that Jeanne Calment was a devout Catholic throughout her life. She often prayed in the mornings and reflected on her long life, questioning why she had outlived all her family and inheritors. Her faith may have contributed to her longevity and outlook on life, as she maintained a positive and introspective attitude despite the many losses she experienced. The real question is, how are we using the time we've been given? Are we living with purpose, aligning ourselves with God's will, and making the most of our days? Let's remember that our lives are a gift from God. Whether we have 120 years or just a few decades, each day is an opportunity to grow closer to Him, to love others, and to make a positive impact in the world. As we reflect on Genesis 6:3 and the story of Jeanne Calment, there are meaningful lessons modern women can draw from these narratives. These stories, while rooted in ancient texts and history, offer timeless principles that can inspire and guide us today. Value of time. This passage emphasizes the finite nature of human life. Modern women can learn to cherish their time, prioritize what truly matters, and live purposefully. Health and longevity. The reference to lifespan can inspire women to focus on their health and well-being, adopting lifestyles that promote longevity and quality of life. Legacy and impact. Knowing that life has a limit can encourage women to think about the legacy they want to leave behind and the impact they want to have on their families, communities, and the world. Spiritual reflection. The passage can serve as a reminder to reflect on one's spiritual journey and relationship with the divine, seeking to live a life that aligns with their faith and values. The fact that the oldest person to ever live, Jeanne Calment, was a Catholic woman who lived for 122 years can further inspire us modern women to consider the role of faith, community, and a positive outlook in achieving a long and fulfilling life. There are many factors involved in a long life, of course, but these factors listed can play a role as well. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. What if the real message of Genesis 6:3 isn't just about numbers or years, but about the quality of our lives? How we spend our time, the relationships we build, and the legacy we leave behind, that's what truly matters. Thank you for joining me today as we explored this fascinating verse. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the Bible's mysteries, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more content like this. Let's keep exploring together. See you in the next video.